And welcome into another post-game edition of Spits and Suds. I'm Gavin Spittle of 1053 The Fan. Thank you, as always, for joining us and supporting Spits and Suds. Unfortunately, it was the end of the season tonight as the Stars fall to Edmonton in the Great Northwest by the score of 2-1. And joining me tonight to talk about it is D Magazine's own and his great Substack, just like Sean does. It's called Stars Stack. So make sure you subscribe and support a guy who has supported Spits and Suds all along. It's the wonderful David Castillo. How are you, my friend?
You know, I'm doing great. And you know why I'm doing great? And I realize we're jumping like right into the analysis. I'm doing great because, like, listen, I get it. You know, they're part of what I write and what I find fulfilling when it comes to writing is criticism, analysis. And so there are a lot of things that I'm going to be interested in writing about. But it doesn't like take away the fact that this team is going to be better next year. And listen, like they beat two former Cup champs. Maybe Edmonton turns into Cup champ and they could say they lost to the Cup champs. Yeah, it's not the right mentality, et cetera, et cetera. But this was, I mean, I'm doing good because I think there are very reasonable explanations for why Dallas lost to a very good team. And there's nothing to be ashamed of. I mean, like Vegas, Colorado, I think if you had asked most Stars fans, hey, by the way, your first round is going to be Vegas, and they're all healthy. LTIR be damned. And your second opponent is going to be Colorado. I think a lot of Stars fans would have been like, oh, man, maybe they don't make it this year.
Right. Yeah, it was a brutal draw. And in the offseason, just sign Corey Perry and you'll go to the Stanley Cup. That's how it happens. That's pretty amazing. I agree with you, David. So I think the word to be used tonight is, and we're not soft pedaling this by any means, Spits and Suds is not affiliated with anybody. We speak our mind.
And we'll get into it, by the way.
Yeah, but there is, I think the correct word to use is disappointment. Completely understandable. Frustrated as far as the lack of power play effectiveness. That's fair. But I want to put things in perspective, and hopefully you're listening and you get some perspective on this as well. In 2020, granted it was a bubble, but your team went to the Stanley Cup. Amazing run. And you lost to a very good Tampa Bay Lightning team, but it was fun. And it was what this town needed during COVID. And it was a shame it couldn't be done at the American Airlines Center. And then you lost to a very good Calgary team. Understandable. I thought Calgary was the better team. And it's like, okay, we need to get better. Then you went to the Western Conference Finals, in which you lost to the eventual Stanley Cup winner. And then you repeated going to the Western Conference Finals once again, defeating, as David points out, two back-to-back Stanley Cup champions. So 3 out of the last 4 years, you have been in a Stanley Cup Finals and 2 Western Conference Finals. Teams around the NHL are jealous of Dallas. They're jealous of you as Dallas Stars fans. So I just want you to take some perspective out of that. And understandably, if you're frustrated tonight, I can understand that. I think David's frustrated. I'm frustrated that it, couldn't go 7 games and the Stars couldn't move on. That said, what David said is 100% true. Unlike the 2020 team, who had some very young kids looking on that were not playing, and Robertson and Ottinger got in and scrap duty, this team has the potential to be even better next year. With Liam Bichsel, with Maverick Bourque, with some offseason moves. So understand frustration tonight, but just understand this is not like some NHL teams where you have to completely rebuild or make trades. This is a team that has an extremely bright future. This has a management base that is pulling the right triggers, as well as a coach that is taking you to 2 Western Conference finals. If you want to make the argument that Pete DeBoer can't take you all the way, I'm willing to listen, but I'm not going to let go of a coach that has taken me to 2 finals in a gauntlet of a conference. 1-8 this year. Any of those teams could have made it. I mean, look what Edmonton has done. So that's the perspective I wanted to bring tonight. And we're going to have a lot of questions. And I'm so glad David, with his perspective, with his knowledge of the system as a whole, can join us tonight. And let's have a conversation. And just wanted to say that, David. I think I agree with you. And I also let's point out this game tonight. I was frustrated after Friday night. I thought, and I hate to use the word effort or quit, I just didn't feel as though the energy was there. Tonight, I don't think you can be mad at your team. They scored on 2 power plays, and that's how they win games. And it's not just a Dallas situation. That's how they did it against the LA Kings as well. So this is a top tier Edmonton Oilers power play with the best player in the world, a top 10 player in the world in Draisaitl, and a defenseman, which everyone is now know, named Bouchard. And oh yeah, there's Hyman as well, a 50-goal scorer. So, I thought the Stars played really well. I wanted them to get over 30 in the shot column. I thought, there were little things they could have done, David, but overall, I thought they were the much better team tonight. It didn't turn out that way. And I think as a whole, I thought Edmonton was better in the series, but I thought tonight this easily could have been, if the puck had bounced a couple of ways or went on the stick, I think easily we could be playing on Tuesday night.
Yeah, I just want to rewind a little bit because I do think that the game was kind of interesting in terms of how to analyze it and unpack it. One of the reasons why I bring up Vegas and Colorado is not just to gas up Dallas's accomplishments or because that's the only sort of positive thing I can kind of latch onto while crying inside. I don't think that's it at all. I think part of it is that and granted, like I said, we'll get to the criticism because I think there were things that Dallas did that were absolutely self-inflicted. Maybe not this game, but certainly throughout the series. But the reason why I bring up Vegas and Colorado specifically is because this really, this Edmonton series really kind of felt like Dallas sort of relying on a very limited sort of health bar, a la Street Fighter, right? I mean, there were so many plays and shifts and sequences where I just felt like this team, having already sort of grueled through and fought through the muck for so much just to get there, really kind of seemed to be on E. And that's not really an analogy either, right? Chris Tanev, Rupert Hintz, I think clearly not 100% throughout the series. And so I bring those up because I really feel like, man, this was when I think about the series overall, maybe not my biggest takeaway, because again, there are a lot of things worth criticizing. But my biggest takeaway just feels like, man, especially the last 3 games, this just seemed like a team running on E. This just seemed like a team that had really just kind of done everything it could, haven't already fought through so much. And you also just kind of happen to be matched up against a really hot, again, Edmonton. I said it over and over again in my preview of the series. Edmonton's 57%. I realize people are gonna roll their eyes at the fancy stats all the time. I get it, but maybe this is your cue to start paying attention to that stuff, right? Shot attempts and expected goals. These are things that, broadly speaking, tend to be fairly predictive. Edmonton over 57% expected goal share was the 5th best mark at even strength of any team since 2007. So it's not like Edmonton was just oh man, they got hot at the right time. No, they were a very, very good team throughout the regular season. You just had a Stuart Skinner that was much more human in most games than he was in the series. And don't let sort of Vancouver's PDO fool you into thinking that was a close series. It really wasn't. It went 7 games, but whatever.
Right. Yeah, no, I agree. We have to stick tap Edmonton, and there's a reason that their head coach was outspoken as far as, the calls aren't going our way, because you see why. And listen, whether it made a difference or not, that was a great coaching move. Like, it's not whining when you are trying to get in the referees' heads. And I don't think it made a difference. I mean, listen, Edmonton was 2 for 2 on the power play tonight. Dallas was 0 for 3. I saw a lot of chatter on, a missed elbow on Stankoven. I agree. It was a penalty. But Mason Marchment also elbowed an Edmonton player along the boards. It was a high hit. That was also a penalty not called. So we can't just post about Stars missed calls, because there were some other calls the other way. And that happens in a series. But it wasn't the referees. The referees did not determine this series. It was special teams and how effective they were. But let's start from the beginning, David. Maverick Bourque being inserted into the lineup, but being inserted in the lineup on the 4th line. What did you think about that?
Is this where I get to like rant about like the problem with development and my issue with maybe not. However, I think, listen, like Maverick Bourque was never going to just play a ton of minutes, and he was never going to get on the top line. The thing that I would have, my reptile brain would have personally, like my armchair critic, wanted to see was Maverick Bourque reunited with Logan Stankoven.
Yeah,
but I get it. My thing was, my only issue with that was, and this is nitpicky, I realize, because just trying to rearrange things, trying to play Tetris with what Dallas had was always going to be tricky. My main thing is that, like, well, Pavelski, who was actually good this game, and I want to give credit to him because I've been like hypercritical. I've never liked being that, but he really has not been good. Was actually good tonight. However, that was my first thought was, well, Maverick Bourque, like being next to Joe Pavelski, is not going to do him any good, sheltered minutes or not. Like if you want Maverick Bourque in the game and you want him to make a difference, and you're not just throwing him in there because it's a desperation move, then he doesn't need to be on the 4th line. He doesn't need to be, he doesn't need to be next to someone like Pavelski, who was struggled. And who, again, despite that, he didn't. But of course, a lot of it had to do with the fact that, well, he got bumped back up throughout the game. But I personally thought, as I've said often, which is that, listen, most of the game is played at even strength. I don't care that Maverick Bourque, like, who plays on the penalty kill in the AHL, by the way, I don't care that he can't PK the way Dellandrea does, or that Dellandrea PKs and that Radek Faksa PKs. Bourque, if I'm just looking at what he does from shift to shift, and we saw some of this, Bourque is a playmaker, but he's also grown into a dual threat. And so to me, I'm looking at like, well, what does he give you from shift to shift? Can he make an impact offensively? Yes. And he did that tonight. And so I was actually honestly surprised because it just wasn't an ideal situation. He wasn't on the ideal line. So I didn't necessarily expect him to like look great. I mean, he's a player that kind of is very subtle, right? A real nuanced player. He doesn't have like a ton of speed. He's nothing like Logan Stankoven, just stylistically. So I was actually pleasantly surprised that he looked as effective as he did.
Yeah, I also want to give credit to Chris Knobloch and the coaching staff. I think something that won't show up in the stat sheet, but I think it was a difference. I felt as though the Edmonton forecheck was really effective against the Dallas defense. And specifically, I wanted to talk about Thomas Harley. Bright future ahead, but I think he had his struggles in this series, David. I just felt as though the confidence might have, I felt as though he was trying to get rid of the puck as quick as possible. I did see one point, I think it was midway through the game, where he rushed and took it all the way into the zone. And I said, that's what Dallas needs to do more. Like the defensemen, I want to see them get into that zone and try to break up that. Edmonton did a good job as far as clogging up around the blue line, which forced Dallas to dump and chase. And dump and chase can be effective at times, but at the same time, I really like when the Dallas, defensemen have that seam and don't look past first and at least can clear the red line to dump it in rather than just, simply look for that outlet pass. And I just felt as though a couple pucks jumped over Harley's stick. To me, it just wasn't a great series, specifically compared to what we saw during the regular season.
Yeah, I think so. This is where I feel like I agree with you. I would just say that this is where I feel like kind of some of that sort of optimism kind of creeps in for me, at least, which is that, yeah, I think Harley had, I can't remember what game it was. It was just really bad. And I was like, whoa, whoa, whoa. Where did this guy come from? But I think it was like game 4, game 5, something like that. But I think it's also worth keeping in the context, right? Which is that not only was this the postseason addended to his first proper regular season, but it was also like his first experience on a top pair against top competition. I mean, he saw some of that last year in the playoffs, but also, he was mostly sheltered. And so I think that kind of thing kind of deserves like perspective. But what I would say though is that I think on the whole, like if we're including Vegas, Colorado, and Edmonton, I think there were a lot of good things, positive things defensively that Harley did. And so that I think he deserves a ton of credit for. It's odd that like his offense just completely dried up. That part you're kind of like, well,
yeah,
what's the balance, right? What kind of player do we want Harley to be? And so I kind of wonder, and this is really kind of, I think, segues into like an offseason question. I kind of wonder how much of that was on Harley's assignment or how he interpreted his assignment. Did he feel like he was meant to be the defensive portion of like the Miro Heiskanen pair? Or did he feel like, well, he needed to just play within himself the way they asked him to, when he was in Texas and didn't play on the power play a lot because they wanted him to focus on defense. So, I mean, I think if anything, this is kind of like this is where you get into the discussion about, okay, well, you know what? Maybe it's time to put Heiskanen on his strong side, give him a right shot. People like Brett Pesce and Matt Waugh are going to be available. Load up on defense. Harley and Tanev. There's your top 4. Go. But
yep.
but that's getting way ahead of myself, and that's just me kind of writing lines on napkins.
Sean's not on the program tonight. We can talk about that.
we could be armchair idiots. I love it. This
like in October we would say, David, that's a June or July conversation, and let me see, it's June 2nd.
But I mean, it's a good example, right? I mean, like that was like I think for a lot of people, their kind of criticism going into the trade deadline, which is that like, hey, you absolutely hit a grand slam with the Chris Tanev signing, and you're going to do everything you can to keep him.
Yes.
But man, it would have been nice to get like a Sean Walker or anybody else to make sure, really to upgrade the Hakanpää position, which I realized became irrelevant in the end, but it was so crucial.
Yeah.
When it got down to the marrow, because then they played Niels Lundqvist, who DeBoer didn't trust, semi-self-inflicted also on management. And that to me was that, I think that's also something else you can kind of point to when we write the autopsy report. That's absolutely going to be a talking point. Well, you played most of the playoffs with 5 defensemen. What did you expect?
Right. Yeah. And that's when you talk about the low, fuel tank on empty. That is certainly could be, one of the reasons. I think that's a really good thought. And yes, I do not. When Chris Tanev is getting his things, I think the door should be locked. And I think it's like, we're talking contract now, sir. We're not going to wait until July. And if I'm Tanev in his camp, obviously they're going to wait till July. So, we'll see. But you're right. It was a terrific trade. And to get what they received without having to give up a first round pick, I thought was really, really impressive. And that needs to be a highlight of Dallas's of season for sure. All right. We have tons of Twitter feedback and questions. And so we are going to get to it all tonight. I also want to say the following. The reason that I name people's names is hopefully so you can listen, look these people up on Twitter/X, and hopefully follow them, because after all, it's a community. And, when you know that people are asking questions, and if they're great questions, all the more reason to, follow these people. A good example is Evan Reinhartz. He's the founder, host, and writer of Two Guys and a Hockey Talk, former Fox Sports scout analyst, writer, and hockey goalie. So, people like that are listening to the program, and that's awesome. And he says, great work tonight by Stars, outworked and outplayed, but with special teams that cost the series. Stars have lots to keep their head high. Bork coming in full season of Stankoven, more playoff experience, and they are back in the conference final again next year. Is Evan Reinhardt's David Castillo's kind of dummy account? That sounded like a David Castillo tweet.
Does it? I mean, I guess it kind of. I mean, it sounded sort of mostly level-headed. Well, that doesn't sound like a David Castillo tweet. Oh my god!
Because it was level-headed.
I can't speak. Yeah, I was like, wait a minute. No, it does not. I really don't know how to kind of react to that, other than like, yeah, that's part of what we've been talking about, which is that this is a team that is, and that's what makes them unique. That's where all the sort of talk and accolades for what Jim Nill has done and his scouting staff have done is relevant, because you are talking about two players. By the way, Johnston and Stankoven, like, talk about players that understood the assignment. And yes, it's unfair to compare them. Is it unfair to compare them with Duchesne and some of the other veterans? I don't know, because I feel like these were two forwards that understood how to adjust their game. Granted, they never really had to adjust much, but still knew how to sort of play direct, understood the lack of space in the playoffs. And to me, as far as I'm concerned, might as well be veterans. And now it's just a matter of just leveling up even more.
Spring is here, and you can now get almost anything you need for your sunny days delivered with Uber Eats. What do we mean by almost? Well, you can't get a well-groomed lawn delivered, but you can get a chicken parmesan delivered. A cabana? That's a no. But a banana? That's a yes. A nice tan? Sorry, nope. But a box fan? Happily, yes. A day of sunshine? No. A box of fine wines? Yes. Uber Eats can definitely get you that. Get almost anything delivered with Uber Eats. Order now. Alcohol in select markets. Product availability may vary by region. See app for details.
With Uber Reserve, good things come to those who plan ahead. Family vacay? Reserve your ride as soon as you book your flights. To all the planners, now you can reserve your Uber ride up to 90 days in advance. See Uber app for details.
Don't just take, give with the Instax Mini 12. An analog camera with a bubbly design which comes in a range of vibrant colors. It's got a selfie mirror, close-up mode, and automatic flash control. But the coolest thing about the Instax Mini 12? As soon as you take your pic, you can give someone an instant print. Fill your world with joy with the Instax Mini 12. Find out more at instaxus.com.
Yeah. So here's an interesting discussion, David. David Castillo joins us from D Magazine, and don't forget you can subscribe to his Substack at Starstack. Billy Casey retweeted Sin Bin Vegas, says Pete DeBoer has made the Western Conference Final in 5 of the last 6 seasons with 3 different teams. So these are his statistics on power play. San Jose Sharks, 2 for 13. 2020, Vegas, 3 for 22. 2021, Vegas, 0 for 15. 2023, Dallas, 3 for 11. 2024, Dallas, 0 for 14. Total, 8 for 75, 10.7%. And Harder Than the Truth responds, wouldn't bother to even ask this question because Sean was talking about the personal relationship between Pete DeBoer and Steve Spott, David. And he said people need to understand the human dynamics. They're very, very close. Someone suggested Pete DeBoer fire his power play coach last game, and he went on a rant about how close Pete DeBoer was to his assistant coach, as though the average fan is supposed to know that the power play guy is the godfather to Pete DeBoer's son. The only thing I want to correct you on, Harder, is I don't think it was a rant. I think it was more just a discussion, and I appreciate that Sean knows all of this. So he says, I honestly dread the possibility of Gavin even bringing this up on the pod. Well, too late about that. I will say that one of the things that would need to be addressed in the offseason would be the power play, correct, David?
Yeah, I mean, listen, like it's yes, there's the human element is important. It's important to understand in why change is not going to happen in terms of personnel. However, that has nothing to do with whether or not the in this case the power play crapped the bed, which they did.
Yeah.
So there are a couple things I want to talk about. One, which is that again, Stars fans may not like to hear this, but you have to. And you should respect it because that was 28 consecutive penalties killed by Edmonton. That penalty killing unit was absolutely dynamic.
Yep.
They were well coached. They scouted Dallas's, especially their entries well. And of course, some of this has to do with you didn't have hints for a couple games, but I just think there was a lot of credit belongs to Edmonton's 4-man units for what they did because they really did impressive work. And then, of course, like with Stuart Skinner, he made some key saves. Like he didn't always have to work, but he was focused, and that was enough, and that was the difference. But for Dallas, I mean, there were a lot of things I think they should have done. For example, like getting Joe Pavelski off the power play unit sooner would have really sufficed. And I think there are a lot of things that we can go on about with Dallas, and I think what they can do differently. But what I'll say is that chances are a lot of this is going to change naturally. Pavelski's not going to be on the top unit anymore. He wasn't tonight. So you're going to be looking at players like, maybe Stankoven, certainly Johnston drawing in on the top unit, and that's going to change fortunes. Should they have changed earlier? Yes, absolutely. But I mean, for now, I think the two things are, which is that Dallas power play is probably going to get better just by virtue of different personnel. And Edmonton's penalty killing just absolutely did dynamite work.
Yep. Great perspective. Philip Turner at Philip M. Turner says, so buyout Suter. Thanks for a great podcast. Looking forward to next season. By the way, I mentioned this in another tweet. I'm just going to mention this on the podcast probably a couple times. Don't go away, Stars fans. I know you probably want to take a break and you say to yourself, I need a break. This is disappointing. That's fine. But this is why just hit the subscribe button, because we're going to give you podcasts throughout the off season. Some really, really cool things coming up. And we're not taking the off season off. Granted, it probably won't be as frequent, but we're going to give you some really good podcasts leading up to the NHL draft, leading up to free agency, leading up to re-signing players or not re-signing players. Whenever there's news, we're going to pop on and give you podcasts. So we're not like, hey, everyone, see you in October. We're just going to keep going. So he says, so buyout Suter. Thanks for a great podcast. Looking forward to next season. Did I say that already? Man, it's been a long season. So David, the reality is if you bought him out for next year, he has 1 year remaining, you would have a cap savings of 2.866 in savings, but you would also tack on another year at 1.433 in 2025, 2026. So that's basically.
Right. So the cap is going to go up and it's going to continue to granted small changes, but nonetheless, if you feel like you can leverage that, again, what you save with Sutter and what you add as well, just by virtue of the cap going up, then I absolutely think it's a move you consider. I realize this is whether or not it's going to happen is another story. But for me, I'm if you he was good in the playoffs. For most of it, he was good.
Yeah.
Against Edmonton, that player just disappeared, mainly in the second half of the series. But I think the other thing, too, is that if you feel like Liam Bichsel, who absolutely would have played if Tanev was injured, if you think he's ready, then what's wrong with Liam Bichsel on your bottom pair? I mean, he already got a full season in the AHL, playoff games in Sweden. I think it's quite possible that listen, I get that people are going to be oh, God, here we go again, right? Pro prospect, you don't let them marinate. You're supposed to let them overripe and etc. Like the reason why I am pro Bixel and Bork is not to be different or to give you a hot take or anything like that. It's because I think two things are happening. One, which is that Dallas did a really good job with picking these players to begin with. Much better play. Like if you redraft, if you look back at those drafts, you're going to find that these were some of the better picks. And the other thing too is that players in general at these lower levels are better than ever and better prepared than ever. Look at the way Bork looked. I mean, look at the way Stankoven and Bork looked in their debuts. So, that's kind of the shift in landscape when it comes to prospects, how ready they are, how trained and coached they are is just drastically different. So that to me is part of it. It's not just like, oh, well, I want to see the shiny new toy. Yeah, maybe that's the reptile brain is certainly, dedicated to that. But I think it also has to do with kind of the nature of prospect development in the modern era, away from the NHL teams. Because I don't even know that, to the extent that NHL teams do that, it's largely, okay, did you give us a finished product? AHL, did you give us again, I personally think they're ready. I thought they were ready much sooner than when they actually, got in the lineup. I feel like, let's go. What are they going to give you from shift to shift that is any way inferior to what Dallas has gotten with a lot of the players that have been in their place?
Yeah. I think Alex Petrovic earned himself some money by being inserted into the lineup. I thought he fared well. If Jim Nill decided to go with a seventh defenseman and he was it, I'd be fine with that next year. But kudos to him for stepping up. And once again, it goes back to playing those valuable minutes in Texas during the playoffs so that he was fresh coming in and had played a lot of hockey. Just for perspective, and now's not the time to dive in, but we will dive in the offseason. Here are your restricted and unrestricted free agents. Ty Dellandrea restricted, Sam Steele restricted. What that means is the Dallas Stars can make them a qualifying offer. And if a qualifying offer is made, then they are protected unless a team is going to make them an offer. In the NHL, it is extremely rare that a team offers and overpays because it's usually matched. See, if you want to Google search the Sebastian Aho deal, when Montreal tried to take him from Carolina and Carolina matched and said, thank you, Montreal. You actually saved us some money. Matt Duchene is unrestricted. Joe Pavelski unrestricted. Craig Smith unrestricted. Defensively, Thomas Harley will be interesting. He's restricted. Nils Lundqvist restricted. Unrestricted, Yanni Hakanpää, Derek Pouliot, and Christopher Tanev. And Scott Wedgwood is also unrestricted. So interesting offseason, but we will certainly get into that. But that answers your question about buying out Suter. Philip Harrison Fjord, FJORD. Stick taps and frosties to you and the boys, Gavin. It was a hell of a season. I immensely appreciate the community of coverage you've built around the team. Stick tap to you, Harrison. Keep up the good work. Mr. Canadian Bacon. Is it specifically a Dallas Stars trait to turn the opposing goalie into Hasek or Wah? Or is the difference between having a McKinnon-McDavid goal scorer versus depth? I think the one thing, and this is where shots on goal can be deceiving, although I pointed out before the game that Dallas, when they have 30 or more shots, it means they're more active, and their record was really impressive this playoff run, David. But most of those shots, or a lot of those shots, came from the outside. Edmonton did a really, really good job as far as keeping the Stars from the outside. They also got a lot of sticks on Dallas shots.
Yeah, no, there was. I feel like one of the biggest stories is this is something that a really good writer of analytics, Travis Yost, kind of discussed the other day, which is that Edmonton's, if you're looking for, I think, a philosophical debate or maybe something instructive on Dallas's end in terms of how a roster is maximized, it really felt like dominance was better than depth in this series, where Edmonton's main 5-man unit were just superior. And granted, some of this is maybe kind of like, I think, things that we could not have necessarily foreseen. Like Pavelski, yeah, his decline was clear. Duchesne disappearing was just odd. Like that was, he was a guy. And what makes it even more bizarre is that he didn't just score like a crucial goal in overtime in Game 6 versus Colorado. He looked fantastic. He looked reborn. He was like, oh, wow, Duchesne's back. Awesome. That's great. Talk about like an added weapon to the Edmonton series. And no, like again, that was just that one game, it seemed like. And so I wonder if this series is going to be instructive for Dallas in terms of, okay, we need like, first off, we know that Ben, Johnson, and Stankoven can stay. They're fantastic. What do we do with Robertson and Hintz? Are we going to sign someone in free agency to, make them better? Are we going to like stick Bork up there and kind of focus on those top two lines as opposed to kind of spread things out evenly? I think that's an interesting discussion and something that I feel like was, I think, really a difference in this series as well.
Yeah, I agree. Mindy says, where can I find a link to the pods going forward? I tweet out every podcast, but wherever your favorite podcasts are found, we're on Spotify, Apple, Odyssey. Just look for Spits and Suds, and we'll have fresh episodes, hopefully weekly, including some really cool interviews that I'm excited about in the off season. Cameron says, I blame Sean Shapiro for telling us how easy this series would be. Well, I didn't think he said it that way. I think he said that the Stars would have an easier time. Shame on him. Good run, but this series left a lot to be desired from our side. A lot of people going after Sean for his thoughts, David.
I mean, me too. I do blame Sean.
Yeah.
I mean
yeah.
What's your problem, bro?
But
I mean, I think for most people, and myself, like I'm not going to get into like I told you so mode because I had Dallas win it. I had them win it in 5. I personally thought the series would be competitive, whereas I felt like Colorado was close but not competitive. Like Dallas had done such a great job of shutting down McKinnon. To me, it always felt like a matter of time. Whereas here, it just like the shifts in momentum from period to period were so drastic and just rib cage rattling. Like it was so much. It was almost too much. It was like stuffed crust pizza. Like that's the kind of like hockey I felt like I was watching at times. But I think for the most part, hey, nobody expected Stuart Skinner to turn into Dominik Hasek, which he wasn't. Granted, that was just, I mean, it's the thing that I always kind of go back to with the series, which is that like, man, it really just felt like, broadly speaking, Edmonton was the better team. And that's not to say that Edmonton was the better team like throughout like the regular season plus, or that they're a better constructed team, but that they just caught Dallas at the right time. And in that limited window was the better team. Because, I mean, yes, like Dallas played, I think, a pretty good game, but it felt like a good, desperate game. It didn't feel like a great game overall. I mean, after all, they started out, down early, and that was another thing, right? Like, I mean, tonight was the first time Dallas had generated more than 7 shots on net in the first period. So again, like as we kind of navigate some of the sort of autopsy report kind of talking points, that'll definitely be one of them, which is this team starting out slow, the team losing first periods, losing first games, squandering home ice. Like, if we want to start, chucking red meat to the fans that are just like, feel like the apocalypse has happened. Well, I mean, there's some of it, right? The home ice.
Yeah, I mean, the ineffectiveness at home was a killer. They should have dominated. And honestly, the ineffectiveness at home throughout the season. For some reason, this was a better road team than a home team. It's fascinating. Goaltending, Jake Ottinger finishes with 2.24 goals against, .915 save percentage. I thought the 2 goals tonight, it happens. McDavid made both of them happen. I didn't understand the defensive breakdown on the second goal and how you allow someone that wide open in the slot. But, it happens. But overall, I thought Jake Ottinger was fine this playoff run, David.
Like I'm not ready to quite go there just yet. Like I thought he was, I guess that's the question, right? Like, how much to what extent is fine good enough? I mean, you could say that Stuart Skinner was fine, and that was good enough. So I think that's the part where I kind of like, I look at Ottinger, and overall, I thought he was good throughout the playoffs, right? Much better player than what we got in the regular season. But I think maybe part of it too is you're starting to see why Ottinger is just a slight level below the Shesterkins and the Sorokins and the Hellebucks. He's just not as, to the extent that goaltenders are consistent at all. Like, he's not quite there, and I think he still has like some better hockey in him. Like, again, I didn't think he was bad, and the fact that you can point to a lot of, for example, the penalty kill being a problem, I think is also, not necessarily an Ottinger problem. Ottinger definitely let in like some softies, but man, the way Heiskanen got beat on the power play, like that's
With threats to our nation waiting around every corner, adaptability is more important than ever. When conditions change without notice, quick strategic thinking is crucial. And with obstacles consistently impending, determination is essential in overcoming them. It's this willingness, decisiveness, and resilience that sets Marines apart. With our fighting spirit, we don't just fight battles, we win them. Marines are the constant our nation counts on to fight the unknown. And through adaptable problem solving, we do just that. Learn more at marines.com.
When you need mealtime inspiration, it's worth shopping Kroger, where you'll find over 30,000 mouth-watering choices that excite your inner foodie. And no matter what tasty choice you make, you'll enjoy our everyday low prices, plus extra ways to save, like digital coupons worth over $600 each week. You can also save up to $1 off per gallon at the pump with fuel points. More savings and more inspiring flavors make shopping Kroger worth it every time. Kroger, fresh for everyone. Fuel restrictions apply.
Tough. Last two games, Stuart Skinner with a .971 save percentage tonight, .950 on Friday night at home. So, yeah, he was really, really good. And, it was interesting because on the TNT postgame, what I was able to watch, Wayne Gretzky told a great story. Wayne's brother is the assistant general manager with the Oilers and really takes care of their AHL affiliates. When he was down there, he told Wayne that Stuart Skinner would be a Stanley Cup winning goaltender. So interesting. But he sat 2 games against Vancouver. So, goalies get hot. And I agree. I think there is another level, David, of Jake Ottinger that can be had. And I think next year's an interesting season because that's the final year of the contract that I just feel like he just signed. So it'll be an interesting season for Jake Ottinger next year. Let's see. Fuzzy wanted to talk about Steve Spott again. There was controversy with him coming along with DeBoer since the power play numbers weren't good with Vegas. He says, is it time to let him go regardless of how DeBoer feels? That's a Pete DeBoer and Jim Nill decision, Fuzz. They got to get better on the power play. They got to change things out. I think they will. I think those will be hard discussions, and maybe Steve Spott stays with them and they just change things out as far as personnel.
By the way, real quick, I just want to add something about something that maybe sort of Dallas's power play can perhaps learn from Edmonton, which is that, and this is something that Jack Hahn kind of mentioned and identified in one of his articles, which was how Edmonton was essentially willing to do things that most teams hate, which was be creative. There was a goal, and I can't remember if it was game 4 or game 5, where Edmonton scored with essentially like a 1-4, right? They had 4 men kind of like towards the goal line and within that area with only 1 person up top, which of course teams hate because, well, then you could potentially allow a 2-on-1 going the other way. But with Edmonton, they're able to do that because McDavid's on the power play, and if someone gets free, he's the perfect guy to catch them. So I do think that there are things that Dallas can do that Edmonton, that I think were instructive on Edmonton's end. And that was another thing that I think Edmonton deserved credit for, which was kind of doing a few things, not necessarily by the book, to win this series.
Yeah, absolutely. Larson 36. This team will be in their true cup prime when Johnston and Stankoven reach their primes. I mean, that's what you can wake up in the morning and be excited about next year. Kevin Lawler, thanks for the coverage all season long. Look forward to off-season talk. Last 3 games were infuriating, as I know this team could have played better. They were just out of gas. Yeah, I think they definitely had better games in them. Allison Taylor, what were the Oilers able to do? Just completely stop our offense. Yeah, David, I mean, Edmonton not known for their, defensive work, but I think people need to realize the acquisition of Ekholm, to me, really paid dividends. They're a much better defensive team than they have been in the past. It was almost like in the past, it was they can beat you if they score 5 or 6 goals. That's not necessarily the case, specifically in this playoffs. They've had a lot of shutdown games.
Well, this is one of those things that just like makes my head explode, this is why it's so important to distinguish between defense and goaltending, right? Chances allowed versus chances suppressed. Edmonton was good defensively this year. They didn't allow a ton of chances. The problem was their goaltending, which, yes, obviously doesn't seem like the case now because Stuart Skinner just magically, kind of found himself. But Edmonton, for the most part, is a really solid. I mean, their biggest issue is that for most of their run, Darnell Nurse with Cody Ceci, it's just a massive, just a sieve, right? They've been awful together. It's everybody in Edmonton knows this, right? But for the most part, when I look at Edmonton, I don't necessarily see a team that's bad defensively. I see a team that sort of struggles to make saves. I think before Edmonton had played Dallas, they allowed something like 10 low danger goals, which was by far the most. Really awful. And it was, for some reason, they were just getting in from the left point. But you look at the way Edmonton is constructed. You look at their blue line, Ekholm, Bouchard. In this case, they switched to Darnell with Kulak and Philip Broberg, who I think is a solid prospect. And then a lot of their forwards are good defensively. So Edmonton is not a bad defensive team. They've just had bad goaltending. So it's important to kind of make that distinction. And I think when framed that way, also helps to maybe give yourself perspective and maybe Edmonton a little credit. Again, I don't like talking so positively about Edmonton, but absolutely you have to give credit where credit is due. And
they were
that's on, telecasts and like the commentary booth and all your sort of national shows not doing a good enough job explaining to you why a team allows goals. But that's neither here nor there.
Yeah. Mayor Bear, who has been with us all season, thank you so much. No victory frosty today, but a big celebratory margarita to you, Gavin, from the Pacific Coast. Thank you. I wish I was joining you. Thanks for a great season covering our boys. You've made a good pod, but you've also built community around this team. Really grateful for the work you do. Stick taps from the PNW. Wow. Pacific Northwest. David? I said I was going to visit Spits and Suds listeners outside of DFW, not knowing that this show would grow. So on my list, David, I have to go visit Mare Bear in the Pacific Northwest and then fly to Italy and then go to Switzerland from there. And then I have 2 people to see in Australia.
That's awesome. I mean, I don't really know what else to say other than like I'm always impressed and sort of surprised by sort of where the Dallas Stars love comes from. Like I know with my Substack, I've got like some subscribers in like Alabama and like Missouri. I'm just like, what are you guys doing? But hey, thank you. And
what is that Substack, David?
Like I always feel like I'm speaking a different language when I'm like forced to do this. Like,
I don't care, man.
You can reach me
at
Starstack.
At Starstack, right?
Yeah, but that's awesome. And don't forget San Antonio, right? I have to, there are a lot of great places, but and yes, San Antonio known for their Tex-Mex, which I personally don't care for. Yeah, I realize I'm going to get some heat for that, especially with my last name being Castillo. No, like Tex-Mex and Mex-Mex are 2 totally different things. But there are some great spots that I can hook you up with. So again, something else to keep in mind.
Yeah, absolutely. Can't wait to see you soon. At Sky Maverick 21. Thank you, Gavin. Love your show. Couple questions for mailbag. Duchesne, Tanev, Harley, Nils. Who stays and who goes? David, you want to quickly do this? I mean, it's a quickie. We don't have to go into depth, but I'll just throw them out again. Duchesne, stay or go.
He goes. The playoffs, given what he's able to make, he goes. And there's just no way, given how he played in the playoffs, that Dallas is going to pay anything extra, especially given how they need to spend the money in the offseason with, I think, the blue line being the big priority.
And that's the next one. Tanev, stay or go?
Stays.
Harley.
Absolutely, yeah. I think by the way, I think the cap projection on him per Evolve in Hockey is, I think, something like 4 point something million, or maybe it was a little less. So he's not expected to get a huge deal. I mean, he could, but he's not expected to.
I'm bridging him. Nils Lundqvist.
we know he's this. I mean, he's just I think there's a player there that can contribute. I think he's not quite what people think he is, but I also think he's a player that belongs on an NHL roster. It's just not going to be this one.
Is Gavin Bayreuther an option next season, David?
No. What? Okay, I'm sorry. I don't mean to sort of laugh. I mean, if that's somebody's, if that's somebody's generous, genuine recommendation. Bayreuther kind of had a time where he seemed like a decent prospect, a decent offensive puck mover, and got some time in Columbus, right, playing NHL games. I just think that I think there are more interesting players than Bayreuther at this point. In addition to the fact that I think you're kind of we see this with Lundqvist. I think you're seeing these kind of sort of more small body puck movers kind of getting phased out of the game in favor of the shutdown hybrids like the Bixels. And by the way, there are a few of the defensemen that I actually really like in the AHL. Nobody talks about him, but I think Gavin White has legit potential. I feel like I'm the only one that ever says positive things about Gavin White.
I love that. I'm totally with you. I think that's a great point. Sky Maverick goes on to say, thanks, loves all the insiders and content on the show. We'll always continue to support. That's a compliment for you, David. So there you go. I move further down and let's see. We go to because I had to jump up and now I'm jumping down. Kale says, great run. Such a fun team to watch and cheer for all year. Is Victory Green cursed? At what point do we burn it all down and go back to the old sweaters? # free the Mooterus. For those that don't know, the Stars came out with an alternative jersey, and it was in the shape of was it a bull?
Listen, I mean, it sounded like Steven and Sean were allowed to curse, so certainly we can say fallopian tubes on the show, right?
Yeah. There you go. It was black. It was green. Sorry, yeah, it was black, green, red. Just did not go over well. But there is a small movement of positivity toward that jersey.
I'm the wrong person because I'm a hard sell when it comes to jerseys and sports apparel, especially now that it's done by Fanatics. I don't know how much crap I can talk about them on the show, but anyways, what I would just say is that that was the one jersey I would have absolutely bought, and maybe still should. But yes, free the Mooterus, 100%.
Yeah, I wish. I love their Winter Classic sweaters. I thought that was a real classy. I love the green color. I love the D. I just think it had all the makings, and I just hate that they can't wear that anymore. So I really thought that one was special. Daniel Acton says, F in Canada, should we invade? It would be easy. Just throw a glass bottle of maple syrup in the air and they'd be distracted. So, yeah, I listen.
Wait, what is the question?
No, there isn't. They're just people making random statements. And tonight I'm letting them fly because they're frustrated, David. I will say, as a hockey fan, and don't kill me, it's nice to see a Canadian team in the finals and it's awesome to see a country rally around one team.
Yeah, this is where you're losing my support, Gavin, and maybe even my presence here on this. No, I'm just kidding. Man, that was like, I feel like to me it just comes down to, and I said this on Twitter. I don't think anybody really replied to it, which I thought was kind of amusing. Which is that this sounds strange, but I hate underdogs in hockey. I hate underdogs in hockey precisely because I have to listen to 10,000 different variations from usually like Canadian media talking heads about like, well, they want it more and they got fire in the belly. And that's usually not what it is at all. It's like a goaltender that's just absolutely playing out of their minds, or simply getting lucky. And they don't want to talk like luck is a dirty word in hockey, but it's absolutely a factor. And so the reason why I'm saying that is because I don't think Edmonton is a lucky team. I think they were a very good team. I think there were a lot of reasons to feel worried about this matchup when it first happened. I think not just necessarily because of the Oilers, but like we've talked about, also because of like Dallas's just kind of like grueling journey to get there. But nonetheless, I think Edmonton in Florida is going to be absolute like chaos. Magnify. I mean, like it's just going to be like nuts, and it's going to be great. And if you love
the
hockey,
coaching matchup,
you'll watch it.
I love the coaching matchup. I love what Paul Maurice has done there, and I think that team is fired up after what happened to them in last year's Stanley Cup Finals. They've been a tough team all year long. So interested to see if Tkachuk can get under anyone's skin. So at the same time, how do they stop the Edmonton power play? There are so many aspects that is interesting. Personally, I don't really care about the national numbers because if that's the case, then just cancel the league and go back to the original 6 and call it a day. So, I think
it's important to remember that Florida, their penalty killing is just as good.
Yeah.
Dangerous as Edmonton. I mean, that's the other thing that you should kind of, especially for Stars fans, it's kind of really still a little salty, which is totally justified. I'm right there with you, but you really have to ask yourself, how confident are you if Dallas had forced a Game 7, one, that they would have anything left for the Panthers? A Panthers team that you could argue might even I wouldn't be surprised. I expect this series to be competitive, but like if Florida just, mopped the floor with Edmonton, I wouldn't be surprised.
Yeah, absolutely. Raphael Iberg, the Bleu Grature, says probably too late for the show, but still bitterly disappointed after beating two teams that were better than the Oilers on paper. Thanks for the pod. I'll be listening next season, especially without local coverage. So, pretty awesome. Raphael is, British as well as American. So we actually have a couple British listeners, which is awesome. And that means a ton to me because I am actually a British guy. My mom hails from Bolton, England, for those British listeners. Let's see. I throw those random facts in. I know no one cares. Let's keep going down. Simon Cave, thank you for the comments. Once again, he retweeted the Pete DeBoer power play issues over the years. Dylan Moreland, once again, the power play issues. Billy on the power play issues. So a lot of people throwing statistics out regarding the power play, and it was a massive part of the series. Howie from Denver, Colorado. Pretty sad. No words. Great effort, but came too late. We got superstarred by Edmonton. I did want to stop there, David, because when they don't perform well, we highlight superstars. We tend not to talk about them as much when they come up big tonight, like Connor McDavid did.
Yeah. I mean, this is also... McDavid really illustrates, I think, the difference between, say, somebody like an elite player that, compare McDavid to McKinnon. I feel like McKinnon was, even though McKinnon has a cup, and therefore I think other people kind of compare it. Like to me, McKinnon is just an inferior player defensively than Connor McDavid. Whereas McDavid is somebody that can genuinely just jailbreak the game in all three zones. Yep. And he's also somebody that back checks, really sort of treats the game, is a student of the game as well as a hard worker. And I think that was the difference, which is that you have the world's best player who could score on you at any time or create plays at any time, but who also just wasn't going to bleed chances against the way McKinnon did. And that was the difference. And that was why this was just ended up being a much more difficult assignment for Dallas defensively than Colorado, which is that McDavid is just a much more well-rounded player.
In sports, we see a lot of players great one way, either great defensively or offensively. In the NHL right now, I think we have two that are very good on both ends, like elite all-timers in Sidney Crosby and Connor McDavid. And for everyone that thought that Sidney Crosby was dead, I think it got to him, and he just was on a tear at the end of the season, almost made the playoffs in Pittsburgh. Howie also says, separate note, thank you so much for the podcast. Made this year's journey so awesome and so many good moments. Listen to the pod after a win. Can't wait till next year. Bright future ahead. Thank you so much for all your input throughout the year, Howie. Like I said, we'll be there throughout the off season for you. Supporter of DFW Wyatt says, I'm not suggesting firing anybody, but it's glass ceiling for this coaching staff that has become a troubling trend. David, your thoughts on the coaching staff?
There are things that I think, it's one of the things that I do want to distinguish when it comes to criticizing coaching is the difference between real criticism and tangible details. For example, a tangible detail to me would be who goes into the lineup in what slot, or who goes on the fourth line, who draws in, why did Craig Smith get scratched? Those are tangible details. The real analysis, I think, with the coaching staff is, to me, I kind of go back to them trying to decide if they want to be a team that's defined by depth or defined by dominance. Do they want to, stack the top two lines, or do they not? Do they want Miro Heiskanen back on his strong side? I mean, maybe these are also things for management, but it was hard not to feel like Chris Knobloch outcoached DeBoer. And I don't think you can say that too often, which is, I think, a credit to DeBoer, but also you kind of also wonder, it kind of prompts other questions why is that? And there were things that I think DeBoer absolutely could have done, more tangible details, like dropping Pavelski down to the fourth line way, way sooner. But I mean, how many NHL coaches would have absolutely waited till the 11th hour to drop Pavelski down onto the fourth line?
Yeah. One of the things is that I would like to see in the off season, like the other night, Friday night, obviously it wasn't happening for the Stars. I thought at times during the season, it was, I guess the old saying is one track pony. It was one of those situations where if they were shut down and the speed was kind of eliminated, it would just continue doing the same thing. And I think in the off season, some adjustments should be made. And I'm going to use the team that the Stars knocked out, and I get it. But I felt as though Vegas won the Stanley Cup in that they could beat you with goaltending. They could beat you defensively, they could outscore you, and they could beat you physically. And that's what I like to see in my team. So I would like to see an improvement in some areas, that if one area it's just not happening, that some energy could be provided and you could win games in other ways.
It's interesting you bring that up, because usually, I'll be honest, usually when you bring up kind of the sort of physicality element, I'm just like, here we go again. Gavin, wants to see the return of Hatcher and Matvichuk.
Old school spittle for sure. Yeah.
And I don't think there's a real sort of calculus for that and whether or not it sort of leads to team success. But I am surprised, and I would say that was missing this series.
Yes.
That was something that you just did not have. And I realize, that kind of takes two. They seem to have like a gentleman's agreement. And it really wasn't until this game that you saw like Ben doing some sort of aggressive, sincere face washing. But yeah, I would have liked to have seen, I think, and you saw some of that. Actually, what am I talking about? You saw a lot of that in the Vancouver series. And even though correlation is not causation, if you want to kind of look at something Vancouver did successfully that Dallas did not, it was getting underneath their skin, being physical with them. And Edmonton just didn't have to worry about any of that. And if anything, I felt like Edmonton was just simply the more physical, nastier team. And I think no player, it doesn't take like a goon to sort of to be physical, to be more imposing. I think no player better represented that than Zach Hyman. Like I always looked at him as the forward that Dallas's defenders had the most trouble with, because he could burn them. Like, he could skate with Heiskanen, which was one thing, but he also had, the muscle and power to also kind of, win battles against like Tanev and Lindell. And I always felt like whenever I watched Hyman, like he was the player that I think seemed to like scare Dallas the most, because there was no obvious defense against him. Whereas against McDavid, Dallas, just, hey, get back as quick as possible and at least keep him in front of you. Hyman, it didn't matter.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think physicality can be interpreted as old school, drop the mitts, head hunting, whatever you want to call it. But to me, I would classify Logan Stankoven as a physical player in that,
yes,
goes into the boards hard, wins puck battles in the corner, uses every ounce of his body to be effective, where he can push a much larger defenseman against the boards and win that puck battle. That to me is physicality. And I felt as though, an area that could be improved on. I see a lot of stick checking, and I would like to see more. Like, for instance, on that Connor McDavid first goal, I know it's Connor McDavid, but, Sam Steele reaches his stick out. If someone could get a body on McDavid and just push him just a little bit, which is legal to do since he was the puck carrier, I think that would throw him off enough. Now, it's Connor McDavid, and he's slippery, and he has great speed. So, but in those situations, if you have the ability, that's when I would like to see, from a defensive standpoint, a little bit more physicality used. And you're right, Vancouver certainly, worked on that and tried to wear them down that way. Blake says, hate the way it ended, but the Oilers played a far better series. Stars just couldn't get anything consistent going offensively. And when they could, the defense would break down and give it away. Those Vegas and Colorado series took a lot out of this team. I think that was a great point that David brought out. That certainly might be the reason. Zach Mitchell, great season, was expecting to make the final this year. We have a lot to be excited moving forward. Absolutely. Trey Justice, why were they so bad at power plays this series? We've dove into it. I would love to see more puck movement. Clearly, they need to get someone in front of the net. They just couldn't kind of set up shop. And I just, you compare the power plays, and granted, it's got McDavid and Draisaitl and Hyman and Bouchard, but they were really effective. Bunch Mox says, great season for the Stars. Yeah, I know. At Mox Bunch. Great season for the Stars with a tough ending. Really appreciate your coverage in the pods all season. We'll continue to listen through the offseason. Sucks to be knocked out of the Western Conference Finals again, but wow, what a run. I enjoyed every moment. Let's do it again next year. So, yeah, I mean, it's just a lot of comments. Greg Lunez, thanks for doing this all year. Another awful series by the Stars to end this year. Honestly, worse than the Vegas series due to the circumstances. Look forward to listening again next year. SPF can't get past Game 6 of the World Conference Finals. Funny how those ghosts that haunted us last winter, early spring, come roaring back. Main guys not showing up. Maybe if they played like they did tonight's game, I listened through last summer and will this. Thank you so much. So, yeah, I think that about does it as far as, I'll try to answer everyone else, David, but I need to let you go to sleep. You've been a beast all season long. We have reached the point where I think, I'm going to say it in front of you. I hope you join us for some off-season programming.
Like absolutely. Like one of the things that I intend to write about is not just the sort of garden variety, like, oh, what went wrong? How did they lose? We kind of talked about that for a while, and I think people more or less get it. But I like this draft is, I think, really interesting. And granted, you'll probably like have better luck kind of talking about the draft with someone like Steven at 100 Degree Hockey. But like we all talk about how this team has succeeded really on the back of their draft, specifically being able to land these late first round picks like Johnson, like Bixel, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Bork was like 30th overall. And this draft absolutely has a potential to add somebody like that. Like it's a really deep draft. It's a deep draft in different ways. And even though I wouldn't expect Dallas. I think Dallas would have a reason to draft, say, like a left winger, because left wing is pretty barren after Robertson and Ben. But it's hard to believe. It's hard not to believe that they're going to be aiming for, say, a right shot defender. And there are some pretty good ones at where Dallas is going to be drafted.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. All right. So your Substack is called @StarStack, and we can also catch you in D Magazine, and kudos to the D Magazine editor and staff. They've done an amazing job this year as far as the coverage with you, with Robert, and with Sean. So stick tap to you, my friend.
Stick tap to Mike Palucci, who should absolutely be invited on the show, by the way.
Oh yeah, no doubt. No doubt. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I'm looking forward to having him on, and because I'm interested to hear as far as when other outlets didn't dive in, that he decided to dive in and do more Stars coverage. I thought that was really cool. Also wanted to shout out Robert Tiffin. We have a rotation of people, and Robert's been terrific. starsthoughts.com also writes for D Magazine, but starsthoughts.com @Robert Tiffin. He'll join us throughout the off season as well, and does a really, really nice job. Obviously, Sean Shapiro @Sean Shapiro and his Substack. And he does a great job. Leah Asimakopoulos from the Dallas Morning News joins us. She's terrific. Boy, Leah had flight problems. She got in a car accident, and she still covered all the games. So she deserves some rest. So kudos to Leah. And of course, as David mentioned, 100 Degree Hockey, which is Stephen Reserve. And there's still time to get the book called We Win Here, which Stephen co-wrote with Sean Shapiro. I think I covered everyone. And shout out to my dog Rico, because that's what I'm going to promote tonight, my friend.
I don't think you did, actually.
Oh. And thank you one and all for your support. Like I said, we're not going away. We're going to have some great off-season programming. Super excited about the upcoming NHL draft, NHL free agency. Try to get Luds on the program. Luds has been huge all season long. He's been great. So kudos to him. Just stick taps all around. And, I feel like I'm saying goodbye, but you know what? We'll have episodes this week, so I'm not saying goodbye. I just want to say thank you. So for David Castillo, the great David Castillo, thank you so much for joining me tonight. I'm Gavin Spittle.
Great.
Yeah, come on. I'm trying to dismount here. So thank you, Stars fans. Thank you, David. And we'll have some cool programming for you this week. So remember, Stars fans, when you go to sleep or as you're waking up, disappointment or frustration is allowed, but just understand, as David properly pointed out, the future is so bright for our Dallas Stars. So let's just take a breath. And I'm already excited about October and the moves they're going to make in July. Jim Nill and his staff are probably already going to start working in the next couple of days. This is going to be great. So we'll talk to you soon on Spits and Suds. Have a great day.